There we go. So we could probably get started if you think we're ready, and we've given it a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, my name is Miranda. I'm chair of the Emerging Professionals Committee. Thank you everyone for being here. I know it's a lot different than our normal ugly sweater party. I sit on the committee with Maddie and Robbie, who doesn't look like she's here yet, and Juan was with us. He's kind of still with us, but now he's also off doing other awesome things. So we'll start out with our sponsors, give them a few minutes to chat. We're extremely thankful for their support and for allowing us to make this donation to Constructing Hope. And then we'll go into Pat and Constructing Hope, and we'll hear a little bit about them. And then we'll lead into Melody, who's gonna walk us through what the heck specs are. So, and I think you're up first with Sherwin Williams. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad that you all were able to join tonight. My ugly sweater is probably not going to win because every time I look at it, I think it's cuter and cuter. So I don't know if I can show it easily, but maybe not.
Oh my gosh.
But it's some little Eskimos with their igloo and putting up a Christmas tree. The funny story about it is my husband and I went to go pick up, our ugly sweaters several years ago, and we went to a thrift store and we were checking out, and the lady at the cash register was like, "These are so cute." And we didn't have the heart to tell her that they were for an ugly sweater party, but it still has the tags. So that's what I got for my ugly sweater. So my name's Anna Atchison. I work for the Sherwin Williams Paint Company, and I'm the architectural rep for the state of Oregon, Southern Idaho, and Wyoming. And I've met several of you before, but for those of you that don't know me, my role is to assist architects and designers with their paint and coating specifications, to answer product questions, and also provide color resources. My specialty is architectural coatings, so interior, exterior, and high performance paints, but Sherwin Williams has a coating for nearly any substrate or project type. We also have coatings for floors, roofs, coil and extrusion, which is what you would see on like metal panels or curtain wall systems. We have coatings for tanks, wastewater pipes, and fireproofing, and many other different types of substrates. To support the vast coating types, we have several specialty coating divisions, and I work closely with the reps in our specialty coating divisions. So if you ever come across a project where you have questions on a coating, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to help. And if it's not something I can help with, I'll be sure to get the right contact involved in the conversation. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about kind of, as everyone knows, over the last 9 months, life has kind of changed. And I think we're likely to see that into a majority of 2021. So I just want you all to know that I'm available by phone, virtual meeting, and email to support any of your project needs. I also have CEU opportunities like many of the other reps. So if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to present to you and your team, or just to yourself and a small group of people. There's really no group that's too small to have one of those presentations. And then another thing that I've been focusing on this month and into next month is our Color Mix Forecast 2021 events. So Color Mix is a presentation on color trends that are forecasted for 2021 and beyond. And I have another presentation coming up on January 19th. So if any of you are interested, let me know and I'll send you the link to register. And that's kind of all I've got prepared for you guys. If you have any questions, I don't know if we're opening it up for questions or not, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. And thank you for your donation.
Yeah.
Up next, we have John with Latacrete. Floor is yours, John.
Good evening, Miranda, and good evening, everybody. And first off, if you haven't seen that Sherwin Williams color mix presentation, I strongly recommend it. It's really cool. So I'm glad Anna brought that up. First off, right off the bat, I'm really bummed. I found the most fabulous Led Zeppelin Christmas sweater, and it hasn't shipped yet. And I had every intention of wearing it tonight. and I don't have it with me. So apologies for not wearing something equally as festive, but such as it is. Our friends at Amazon haven't delivered yet. So again, it's good to be with everybody. Many of you in the specifications and design world know the Latta Creek brand, probably through our tile and stone installation systems channel. I manage the masonry veneer installation systems. We make a full product range of adhesive mortars and cement mortars for thin veneer masonry. Any of Miranda's thin veneer product profile at Mutual Materials, any of Maddie's product profile at Boral. We have a whole line of air and water barriers. We're expanding the product line to include flexible sealants and some high perm rating waterproofing and primary weather resistant barrier materials. So it's a comprehensive product profile. We cater obviously to the masonry trades. I do a lot of work with local Portland masonry contractors, as you can imagine, for installations ranging from thin brick to manufactured stone to natural stone, and both interior and exterior cladding. Our products are highly freeze-thaw stable and a wide range of pointing mortar colors, and we complement all of our adhesive mortars and air and water barriers with a color palette for our tuck mortars and pointing mortars for anything that is non-dry stack like thin brick, etc. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. I know that Maddie and Miranda can track me down. They can track me down at any time. We do a lot of collaboration together. So really good to be with everybody tonight. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to all. And again, thanks for having me. And it's great to be here. Looking forward to the presentation tonight from Melody. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Our next sponsor is the IIBEC. I don't see Susie on here, but do we have anyone else here to represent and talk a few minutes? Awesome. Hi, John. You are up.
Thanks. I'm the outgoing president. We have an officer change at the first of the year. For those of you who don't know what IBEC is, the International Institute of Building Enclosure Consultants, it used to be known as RCI. But since they're into walls and waterproofing and the entire building enclosure, hence the name change in the last year and a half. So we're in our fourth year as a chapter, so we're relatively new. And congratulations to you all for. I got to talk to people across the nation, and I would say the CSI Portland chapter is probably one of the strongest chapters in the nation from all the comments that I've heard. So. Be proud of that. We have our own website. We've got an email. We really promote education over pretty much everything. There are professional certifications that building enclosure consultants can receive from the international, whether it's the RROs for the Registered Roof Observer, the Registered Roof Consultant, Registered Waterproofing Consultant, Registered Exterior Wall Consultant, Registered Exterior Wall Observer, and Registered Building Enclosure Consultant. So we put on beverage and tutelages almost monthly, usually the third Thursday of each month. So feel free to check out our website, and even if you're not a member of the international or a member of the local chapter, feel free to check out some of our educational sessions if you like. And good to be here. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, John, and thank you for your support. Up next, we have our very own Maddie Card with Boral.
Hey. Thank you everyone for attending our ugly sweater event, and really appreciate all the sponsors. And yeah, my company was awesome enough to help donate to the cause of constructing hope. So yeah, my name is Maddie. I work for Boylston Division. I'm the area sales manager here in Oregon. I also stretch out to Southern Washington, really far away. I represent multiple brands: Cultured Stone, Eldorado Stone, Pro Stone, and then our fabulous brand extensions, which is our Flex and Dry Tape, our Drain and Dry Lath, our Kindred, and our Craft Shield water repellent. So a lot of brands thrown out there. I cover them all. If you are interested in knowing more about those, I'll make sure to add my contact information into the chat forum. Also to mention, we are a nationwide manufacturer. So we sell across the US, we sell internationally, and we have multiple distributors in each state. Mutual Materials being one of them, with our fabulous Miranda here. So she's actually one of my customers, which is an awesome partner. And also to mention too, with all of our brands, one of our newest things that we did was we did a rebranding on our Eldorado fire bowls, outdoor living kitchen cabinets, and fireplace surrounds. So now it is known as Kindred. If you want to know more about the beautiful Kindred product line, please go to mykindredliving.com to check it out. We have some great photos in there and just some awesome product to show off, especially if you are working on your own outdoor sanctuary. You definitely want one of our handmade fire bowls. I'm telling you, bomb. But yeah, and then another shout out to our Drain and Dry Lath. Now is the year where we get a lot of rain, even though this year it seems to be a little bit more dry. But our Drain and Dry Lath is a 2-in-1 product. You have your drainage rain screen, and then attached to that is an alkaline resistant fiberglass lath. This comes all together in one roll. There's no need for metal lath. And one roll covers 150 square feet, weighs 27 pounds, super lightweight, super durable, has a warranty. Use it on residential, commercial. And any of our products will go inside and outside of the wall for any of your project needs. So that's my spiel. Thank you, everyone. So now I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our guest, Pat Daniels. She's with Constructing Hope. And you did mention that any donations that were given for this event is all going to Constructing Hope. So Pat, I'm gonna give you the floor. You're on mute, Pat.
Yes, now I am. Thank you. I'd like to start by introducing the program with just a 3-minute video. It's one thing to talk, but I wanted to take an opportunity to just bring you into Constructing Hope. Now, this 3-minute video is something that we use with Murdoch Foundation, because right now we are remodeling our facility. And this is probably the most largest thing that we have going on, in addition to trying to figure out how to have a construction training program online. But we'll start with this, and I'll talk after this.
Ellie, can you share host ability so I can share my screen, please, to show the video? Thank you.
Rebuild the lives of people in our community by encouraging self-sufficiency through skill training and education in the construction industry. Our goals are to help long-term unemployed attain sustainable careers, increase workforce diversity, reduce recidivism, and meet the hiring needs of the construction industry. Our participants are 100% low income and unemployed, or underemployed. 61 to 70% of our folks are formerly incarcerated, and 66% are minorities. Today, we are here to ask your assistance to help us with renovation and expanding our current facility. This project will allow Constructing Hope to not only provide extensive training, but increase the number of participants that we serve in this community. This expanded facility will include a larger, more accessible construction training area, as well as a new state-of-the-art classroom, so that students can use current technology and learn to use computers. Currently, you will see that our classroom and hands-on training takes place in the same space. Furthermore, our training area does not have access to loading and unloading large projects and materials needed for the training that we provide. We have the opportunity that some of our graduates are also well-known artists in the community. So something new that we will be adding to this project is you will see the history of African American in construction on one side of our building, as well as throughout the inside of the building. We are creating a video to just show how confined our space is, the things that we have to work with, and how we are looking forward to renovating our space to what you will see next.
All right, thank you. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of who I'm going to be talking about. You heard the mission of Constructing Hope, and currently we provide 4 classes a year with 25 people per class. With this expansion that we're in the midst of right now, we're expecting this to be completed in the end of March, which will give us the capacity to increase our classes from 25 people to 45 people per class. We're not going to do that immediately with our COVID. We've just had a huge setback that right now we have a pilot class with 13 people, and finding out that it's very difficult to teach construction online. So our next winter class is going to start January 18th, and we're going to start with 20 people in that class. Right now, we have a lot of assistance from the industry where we have people that actually come in and speak with our class, teaching virtually, but our hands-on training is actually taking place on this construction project. We've been very fortunate that we're working with contractors that really believe in the mission of the program, and we've split the class. So half the class will come in, they're doing some framing, they're doing some painting, and they're doing other areas of hands-on training, because in our normal training, what we teach is flooring, roofing, and framing. So we're actually building tiny homes. And then we actually go out into the community. And when you go and take a look on our website, you'll see some work that we've done at Dignity Village and a lot of the homeless camps where we're actually building tiny homes for them so that there's a purpose behind the building. And it also helps my formerly incarcerated participants understand giving back to the community when they can see that they can actually do something to help others when they feel like they don't have anything to give. They're seeing that they really are giving a lot. So we offer 4 classes a year, 25 people per class. This program is very unique. You heard us talk about formerly incarcerated. The history of the program began with Irvington Covenant Church. Back in 1995, this church saw gentrification was happening in Northeast Portland. And there was a lot of African-American men selling drugs out on the corner of Martin Luther King Boulevard. When they came out and talked to them, they found out that they all had felony backgrounds and they couldn't find work. So they decided to create a ready-to-work program to help people get into construction jobs. Well, I came along in 2005, and in 2007, we created Irvington Covenant Community Development Corporation free apprenticeship training program, where we were certified with the help of Northwest College of Construction and Hoffman Construction, standing by our side as board members to help us become a certified pre-apprenticeship training program. I can tell you in 2007, we were happy to make that leap. And in 2008, the pastor who ran the church resigned and a new pastor came in, and this was not his passion. So in 2009, he gave me the program. I asked for it. I was embedded in it by that time. And he gave us the program, and we moved to Church Street in Martin Luther King Boulevard, where we changed our name in 2005 to Constructing Hope. I didn't pick that name, but I am so happy for the person who left it in the file that was working on this ready to work program that no one ever used the name. So it was just waiting for me. It was a present from God. So the rest is history. From 2010, we continued to build our board and build our classes from classes of 12 to currently classes of 25, and to hopefully by the end of 2021 to classes of 28. And I think in 23, we're going to up those numbers to 45. We're not trying to move too quickly, but what we're going to do in 2023 is add an additional class. So what makes us unique? We are unique because as we grew this program, our whole job was about looking to see what are the barriers and how do we remove barriers for these people to be successful. If you know anyone who's been in construction, we call it the FBI. You usually come in through fathers, brothers, and in-laws. And we're not against fathers, brothers, and in-laws. We just want to be part of the fathers, brothers, and in-laws. And I'm happy to say, here we are now in 2020, and we have a lot of fathers, brothers, and in-laws in the trades. To date, we have helped more than 1,300 families change their lives and become paying citizens, paying into the system, as well as being first-time home buyers and creating generational wealth. So the support services that we provide is, we have been instrumental in Portland helping ban the box so that formerly incarcerated people don't have to go through the scrutiny of never having an opportunity based on a box on an application. I used to be in HR, and that was my sole job, to create the yes, no, and maybe pile. And if you had that box checked, you always went into the no pile. So that was one of my passions for being here to help make this program work. The other thing is having the opportunity to just enter the trades. So our program is set up to give everybody an introduction to at least 6 trades. In our hands-on training, most people are afraid of their math, and we have math set up through PCC where it's all applied math. And so everybody start out at different levels, but by the end of the class, they are proficient at whatever the math level that they need to enter up trades up to electrical, sheet metal, and plumbing. So the another thing that we were very instrumental is creating childcare. A lot of people can't enter the trades because it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and we were one of the first programs to have class start at 6:30. And in some cases, our class is still starting at 6:30 in the morning. We treat it exactly like work, and it's from 6:30 to 4, and you do clock in. Everything in our class is set up so that it's like real world work. And at the end of the day, there's 3 levels of graduates. There's a level 1 that has direct entry, which means that you have not missed more than 1 day in those 10 weeks. You've completed all the certifications that we offer, and you've been participating in throughout the class. That person gets direct entry through all of our union connections, as well as our relationship with Northwest College of Construction and other non-union agencies such as ABC. Our level 2s, we help people get driver's license, and sometimes it means that our level 1 has to be ready to go to work. Our level 2 may just be that I just came from incarceration and I have and need some assistance still in getting my driver's license. So we write a letter to explain why a person graduates at a level 2. Level 3 is kind of not even a question anymore. It means that you failed a test, you failed something. And at this point, we haven't had any level 3s in more than 4 years. So with all the support services that we offer, we ask all of our graduates for a 3-year commitment. This is not a one and done. You graduated the program and you're on your own. We have ongoing mentoring events, which we just had one last night, where we look at current graduates to meet past graduates to talk about the culture and how to survive in a culture that may not be friendly to you, and understand what is racism and what is culture and how to maneuver that. We like to see our graduates go to journeyman as well as move to superintendent level. And I have to say, I'm really happy right now that we have several graduates that have moved to superintendent level. And we have 8 graduates that have become contractors, and not a handyman. They have their general contractor's license. So on that note, I'm just going to stop because I could go on and see if there's any questions that I can answer for you.
Well, I just have to say, I think it's just a fabulous program that you're in charge of and that you're doing. And just it's exciting to hear all the positive things that are coming out of it. So I'm glad we're able to help in any way possible. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, one last thing I'd like to add, and Courtney would get me if I didn't, is how can you help? And one of the ways that we thought we'd offer is we have a social media ambassador program where we will send you a quarterly message that you can send out about our program. with that message, it's how do you put the information on social media. At the end of the year, we have a social media ambassadors networking event. To learn more about how to donate, you can also go to our website at www.constructinghope.com. I will put Courtney Jenkins' information in the chat, and you can always contact her. And when we talk about the classroom, there's opportunities. I was writing down everybody's information and I'll be in contact with you because we are always looking for speakers to come into the classroom. In the classroom, remember, our guys are green. They don't know anything about a lot of different trades. When they come in, everybody wants to be a carpenter because that's the one thing you hear about the most. It's amazing to see them come in and find out that I really like tile work. I didn't know anything about it, or I want to become a sheet metal worker. So that opportunity is one that we always embrace because it's always about learning. And we teach the apprenticeship survival guide. So the one thing that we'll ask you is to come in and talk about your work. And if you could tie it to one thing in our apprenticeship survival guide, as in the importance of nutrition. So it'll be easy things like that, and we'll provide the information for you. So I want to thank you so much for supporting our organization, for inviting me here to speak today. And I hope you learned a lot about us. And I look forward to seeing some of you join us in class.
Yeah,
Thank you, Pat.
I'm down to do training.
Thank you, Pat. We're so happy to have you here and to hear about all the amazing things you're doing and to support you in your endeavors.
You're welcome.
Before we lead into Melody, we have two small things. First being, if you do need or would like your continuing education units, put your information in the chat, and at the end, Courtney will save that and report all those. So we'll get that taken care of for you. Second being, we need a photo of all of us here and of your sweaters so that Maddie and I can pick a winner for the $50 Powell's gift card at the end. So if you can, show your sweater the best of your abilities. Awesome. And on 3, 1, 2, 1, we're waiting on you. And 3, awesome. I got it. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so Melody, senior specification writer at Deltec. Amazing, fun, super awesome. The floor is yours.
Okay, sorry, I had to find that unmute button. All right. So I have tried to make this a little fun presentation tonight. I am super excited. That was really, really awesome information about Constructing Hope. And wow, you have really thought it through like super well. That's just like you could be a specifier, Pat, because you've thought about all the little details and you've connected all the dots. So thorough, it's wonderful. Okay, let me figure out how to share my screen. Oh, wait. Give me just one moment here. Let's see if it pops it up on the right one. There we go. All right, are you seeing my slides? Okay. All right, so we are going to put the spec in Spec-tacular tonight. And I dressed the part, hopefully enjoying my homemade shoulder pads as well as my awesome sweatshirt. So putting spec in Spec-tacular. Just a little bit about me. I'm a master spec writer at Deltec. Actually, I'm an architectural specifications writer with Master Spec. Master Spec content is owned by AIA, and Deltec partners with them to keep that content current. So I specialize in concrete, masonry, and building envelope content. So I definitely need to get to know John with Laticrete a little bit better. And I've also been looking at the IIBEC stuff too. So this is all like such a just synergy night where I'm like, oh, all people. So I am a licensed architect. I've been licensed since 2007, and I am a CSI Portland chapter board member and the outreach committee co-chair. So I moved from Oklahoma to Portland in 2019, and it was really awesome that I already had kind of a network of CSI friends and faces to jump right into and make me feel at home. I'm also a member, I just joined this year, ACI, PCI, and SCIP. ACI is Concrete Institute, PCI is Precast Concrete Institute, and SCIP is Specification Consultants and Independent Practice. We're going to go over a couple more acronyms later tonight too, because it can be a little bit of alphabet soup, like all the letters after my name. So you will learn a little bit more about that later too. So tonight we're going to understand what specifications are and why they are important. A little bit about what specifiers do on a daily basis. And we're going to kind of dig in just real quick to a spec section and edit it to suit a project so you can kind of get an idea of what that process looks like. We're going to find out how you can contribute to better project specifications from any role that you are in within the industry, and discuss considerations for a career in spec writing. Okay, so what are they? Describing or identifying something precisely is just kind of the generic definition of specs. The EGCDC and the AIA both have a similar definition. The part of the contract that consists of written requirements for materials, equipment, systems, standards, and workmanship is applied to the work, and certain administrative requirements and procedural matters applicable to the work. CSI defines it just slightly differently. You can read that yourself on there. But essentially it's all the written documentation portion of the work, the administrative things that you would not want to put on your drawings. And the project manual, slightly different than the specifications, and I'm sorry for the kind of slightly blurry image on the left, but this is such a great image that I've had like saved on my computer for years and years. And off to the side, you can sort of see this project manual. It's kind of the middle dashed line over on the left. And it is around the procurement requirements, the contracting requirements, and the specifications. So the specifications are actually only that little portion, Division 1 through 49. Actually, there's more than that now. So this is just very old. And then you can see that the drawings are also a part of the contract documents, and there's like that little kind of piece of contract documents that includes some things. Part of them are packaged in the project manual, and obviously the drawings are usually packaged separately. And then over on the right side of this diagram, you can kind of see which of the after effects, clarifications, proposals, contract modifications, agenda, and how those kind of fit into these boxes. This can all be a little confusing if you don't know it and have never seen it. So, and specifiers do normally handle a lot of those procurement requirements, which live in Division 0. They usually handle those too, even though they're not part of the spec officially, but we normally handle that as well. Sometimes the owner might handle it also. So then digging in a little bit further, the actual specifications are governed by master format, which came from CSI, and that's the numbers and titles. You can see this on the left, just basically the subgroups and the divisions, and you'll see the sections here in a moment, but essentially Division 1, which is general requirements, has your project delivery methods. It ties into the general conditions of the contract, which is the contract between the owner and the contractor. The architect is not a part of that, but those general conditions explain a bunch of things about the roles and responsibilities, and it includes stuff the architect has to do. So the architect never has any sort of contract with the contractor. There's no direct contractual obligation there as far as between those two entities, but there are certain roles and responsibilities, and the owner acts as, or the architect acts as the owner's representative during construction. So that's where the architect comes into play with this part of it. And then Division 1 basically is like kind of the blanket in between those general conditions of the contract and part 1 of each section. So we'll get into this later, but you just don't want to repeat yourself a lot. So Division 1 has a lot of the content that you would repeat over and over again. And it tells you a lot of the general stuff like when I talk about submittals and all these other sections, this is in general how I want to see the submittal. This is in general how I want you to handle a substitution request for any of the sections. So it's all that stuff that you just don't want to have to repeat in each section, and you put it all in division 1. And then part 1 expands on that even further, but just specific to that section and that little portion of work. So you can kind of see this 1, 2, 3, essentially oh, sorry about that. Hold on just a second. So the 1, the overall general condition that tell you all the things that the contractor has to do. And then in division 1, that tells them what they need to do in relation to all the spec administrative and documentation end of it. And then part 1 gets even more specific and tells them, like, okay, for concrete, I need exactly this type of information. The owner does have to give you a little bit of information for division 1. It's very based on the project delivery method, which is basically there's design to build, there's construction management, either at risk or as an advisor, there's IPD. So all of those things are going to determine which exact contract is used between the owner and contractor, but the AIA A201 kind of is usually the general conditions that most of those contracts follow. And the contract is actually yet another document that is separate from that A201 that actually has, you know, like, you will build the building for this amount of money and in this amount of time. So the AIA A201, you can modify it. Some owners do, but most people kind of trust the expertise that the AIA has put into these legal documents over the years. They're copyrighted. You have to have an account to use them, all that fun stuff. So most people kind of use those pretty standardly, and it is a pretty important thing to know and understand in relation to the specifications. So, sorry, let me get back over here. And I'm sorry, some of my memes are going to be really grainy because I just copied them from online. So the sections of each spec break down the project by the work result. So painting and coating is all going to be together, and the painting subcontractor can go there and try to get all of his information that he might need to bid it. So section format is kind of the step down from master format. That is also from CSI, and it divides every part into 1, 2, and 3. So like I mentioned earlier, part 1 is a lot of that general stuff specific to the section. So it's going to talk about, in paint, it might talk about like specifically the sample and how to do a drawdown and things like that. Part 2 is based on your actual products. Normally you're going to have a basis of design product that you might get from your project architect. And then you're going to probably include some other options so that you can get competitive bids. Part 3, execution, is just what it sounds like, execution. That's kind of the installation information part of the section, but you do not want to get into means and methods. That is the contractor's realm. That's one of those things in specs that you always kind of try to make sure you're not telling the contractor how to do things. You are telling him the end result that you expect, and it is up to them to figure out how they get to that end result. So for instance, you would never tell a contractor to use scaffolding. They're going to figure all that out. You just tell them, yeah, here's what you need to put up, and they do all of the how it gets in place part of it. So there are 4 different types of spec sections: descriptive, performance, reference, and proprietary. Descriptive is just what it sounds like. It's going to describe it in detail. Performance is probably going to be based more on achievable, testable, standard type information. Reference specs are going to be based on things like codes and ASTMs and standards, and it's going to have a lot of acronyms in it. Proprietary specs are very often from a manufacturer. It's going to be basically just their information and catered to them. Most specifications that I see these days, though, are a combination of all of that. So it might include a proprietary name of some manufacturers and products. It's also going to have some reference standards. It's also going to have some performance requirements and some descriptive items in it. So, but there are kind of different ways to do it. And then there's different lengths of spec section as well. So you can use an outline, which is typically going to be like a page or less, and it's going to be a very high level overview that you might use during schematic design. Short form is kind of just a much more concise version. There are some specifiers who use short form the entire time. Sometimes they might use short form for DDs and then go out to full length versions for CDs. That's not super typical. Usually you kind of use one or the other, and it's short form is just much more condensed and concise, and full length is going to be a little bit more wordy. I am not a huge fan of outline specs. I kind of felt like they were a waste of time. I sometimes had to do them for a project when it was something like for the VA or for, you know, government, when they really want to just document what they were able to price at each level and things like that. So here's a little bit of a quick primer on some of the acronyms. I know I've been spewing a lot of them out. So ACI is the American Concrete Institute. And actually, look, you can kind of see on this slide, I only got through part of the A's. There are a lot of organizations, there are a lot of letters. And I kind of thought it was funny because I didn't even realize that the ASTM is formerly known as the American Society for Testing of Materials. But the ASTM is a big one in the world of specs, as far as they have specifications and standards, and a lot of, they kind of just outline a lot of the guides for the testing that then we are able to verify a product meets a certain performance level. So that is a little bit on some of the different acronyms and organizations. Ansi is another one that is, it's a standards institute. So a lot of times an organization might have something like a guide, and then they will work with Ansi to make it into code language so that they can then incorporate it. If you look through something like the IBC, the International Building Code, you will see references to things like your concrete needs to meet ACI 301, or other materials need to meet ASTM. UL is another one that they reference quite a bit in the IBC. So I wanted to go through a little example. We're going to get a whole tree. So what kind, right? Where do you start? And I'm sorry, this is really blurry, but here's an architectural drawing, and you can Google this and you can actually find where someone redlined the crap out of it too, and it's amazing. So, and it's weird because zooming in here and it's still blurry, but they put a ton of information on this drawing. So it's got Christmas lights applied evenly to the surface of tree, lighting not to exceed 1 candle power per max each. Ball ornaments, typical Christmas presents. They've got all this stuff. They've got the spacing from the fireplace. They've got native material listed as the ground. I don't know. And then the notes, foliage not shown for clarity and other inexplicable reasons. Number 2, tree to be covered in asbestos-free flocking. So these drawings have shown you dimensions, locations, quantities, aesthetics. Not a bad idea, but where's the spec? And of course, your boss wanted this out the door yesterday. So no spec, we're just gonna throw it out and see what we get, right? So this was the client's expectation. They wanted a living tree. They wanted a fir, like noble fir or something like that. They wanted it full. And you know, we're just out there totally living on the edge. And then value engineering happens. And this happens all too often, where things get cut, budgets get adjusted, and that's our reality. So we ended up with an artificial, a pine and bare. Like, it is just nothing like what we wanted or expected this to be. So you know, I mean, it's pretty clear, obviously, that they did not really meet the design intent of the drawing, but you're living dangerously without having a spec. So maintaining the vision, the specs are all about helping actually get that vision to reality. So did they want a modern, fake, like tinsel silver tree? Did they want the flocked tree? Did they want this weird triangle filled with ornaments? Or did they want toilet paper? It's 2020, you know, like, let's get clear on the vision. And clients can change their minds. So that's scope creep, is when the client keeps kind of making the project bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden you turn around and you're like, we're designing way more than what we are getting paid to design. So trying to keep the client's vision in line is a difficult thing to do. Managing client expectations is not easy, but what we're trying to do with the specs is keep that vision together. And so you have to think through all these decisions, all the elements needed to complete that vision. Guess what, guys? That's a Christmas tree. I had no idea. I was doing like research for this, and I was Googling Christmas tree, and that came. I Googled Christmas tree specification actually, and that came up. That is actually called a Christmas tree. It's a sprinkler. So you never know. You could have gotten a Christmas tree. So who needs them? They set the level of quality for the job, and this is so difficult to explain via a picture. You just can't really talk about quality only with a picture. You need some words. So specs can help you avoid products that maybe don't perform or look like you intended. They can avoid change orders, more RFIs, and increased hazards to the health, safety, and welfare of building occupants. They can also help you avoid litigation sometimes. Making sure your roof is really well put together and doesn't blow off can really save everyone lots of heartache down the road. Construction administration. So while the building is getting built, and the architect usually administers part of this and handles the submittals, all that stuff is instructed by the specifications. So it kind of blows my mind when people are working on CA and they don't understand the specs, because I'm like, do you know what you're looking for? Do you understand what you're seeing there, or what you need to compare that information to really confirm that you're getting what you asked for? So that submittal review is a big part of confirming and verifying that you're getting that level of quality. And a better understanding of specs, obviously, in my opinion, leads to a better understanding of the whole construction process and just how things fit together. So how does each role interact with the specs? The owner can provide some information on project delivery, site information, and obviously those specs, like I said, maintain their vision and quality. And it is essentially the architect's job to communicate their vision via drawings and specs to the contractor. So it's very important, and a lot of times the owners, I think, live far, far away from the specifications and don't want to get involved, but they are living with these results. They are living with the maintenance and the utility costs and the return on investment for their building. So it really does affect them more than I think they are aware of sometimes. So the architects, engineers write the specs to convey those quality requirements and clarify the expected results. The contractors and construction administrators, the drawings and specs are the documents they are following. So it's basically the recipe for what they are trying to build. And the subcontractor, they have to understand and bid their scope of work. It is their reputation on the line. It is their company's money and funds on the line. So if they don't bid it well and something gets pointed out later and they have to eat that, that's a big deal. So, you really want to make sure as a subcontractor that you understand what you are bidding and that you have covered everything so that nothing comes back to bite you later. And product reps, helping the team with technical info is a big part of it. Online is great, but sometimes you just need to talk it through with someone or ask some questions to really nail down how to do it in the best way. They can provide specs, they can assist subcontractors, they can do field quality control. There's a lot of key pieces that the product reps can play in this as well. So a day in the life of a specifier. Sometimes we do research, we do a lot of research. We'll look at codes and ASTMs and technical info, and there's times where you'll see something on a manufacturer's page that says it's a specification and actually it's not. Sometimes specifications just refers to the dimensions of that product. Like with commercial, you know, like if you go to buy a TV and click specs, they're gonna tell you it's, you know, this wide. So sometimes things will say it's a spec and it's not. Occasionally it's not a spec, but it might be a product data sheet or a cut sheet, or like I said, just a list of kind of the features that are available to that product. But a true specification that I'm talking about is a 3-part CSI formatted spec. And most, you know, reputable, like big product manufacturers have specs on their site. Even then, even big companies and great names, every once in a while, they don't have the best specs. Maybe they aren't formatted, maybe they're a little outdated. So it's always good to just double check and make sure, and don't just blindly put it in and think it's good to go. Specs are very rarely good to go just right out of the box or downloaded from a manufacturer. So you have to coordinate quite a bit with the owner, with the design team, with consultants, contractors. You know, we don't, as architects, we may not always have like a direct tie with a lot of subcontractors, but I know I would go to subcontractors to ask them questions about real world things, because I felt like, you know, the guy in the office that's been there and has a lot of experience, he may not, his experience has mostly maybe been in the office, not necessarily putting it together day to day. So I had a friend who worked for a millwork company, and I basically just said, I want to make sure my millwork specs are good, and there's nothing in there that when you get this spec section, you laugh at it and go, ha ha ha, so the architect thinks we do it this way. You know, let's connect the dots and kind of try to get rid of some of these little middlemen. Let me talk to you about, you know, the exact way that this happens. And he gave me, you know, red lines. And I know a lot of times subs and product reps, it's very daunting to maybe give an architect feedback, but it's for the best. They may not always be receptive to it, but you can always try, or just ask if they would like a spec review or something like that. So specs are usually edited from an office master file, or like I said, the proprietary specs that you might download from a basis of design manufacturer, and you may have to edit those. There are lots of different, so I obviously work for one of the companies that creates some of the base software and content that is used for specifications. So I'm doing updates on the back end that then architects use in there, and it's important that the content that they are starting from is current and in line with codes and things like that. And it would take so much time for an architect to delve into and figure out all of that stuff on their own. ASTMs change, they're just the speed of like new technology and things. It's a lot to keep up with in this world. So one of my first bosses told me you can't know it all, so you have to know who to ask. And this is one of those instances where as a specifier, you would rarely ever want to be a specifier without relying on some sort of content that has been vetted and researched by a team of people. So how are they made? Now, unfortunately, in this meme on the left, just change the name of the project, done. Happens all too often. A lot of times specifications just get copied and the title is changed and it's put out the door. And obviously that's not really the best way to do it. Unfortunately, specs just take some time, and there's not a whole lot of great shortcuts to just taking the time and really figuring out and asking the questions that need to be asked to fill in all the blanks and edit these. So you have to know a bunch of stuff about the project, the type of building, you know, what code is it under, where are we at? Location matters a lot for things like the way your wall performs. What is the project delivery? Is it going to bid? We're going to have division 0 stuff if it's going to bid. So then, you know, if it's a public job, you need 3 manufacturers listed usually to be fair and competitive. So there's certain things you need to know up front, just in general about the project. And then you typically start with kind of a table of contents and whittle that down as your checklist and decide what you're going to need in your project. And then you get a list of preferred bases of design materials, usually from the project architect or design team. And I know I personally worked with my designers at my last firm to develop like an exterior materials legend that they would give me so that I had all this information in one place. And then when they changed their mind about it, they would highlight it and give me a little updated version so that I knew they had made a change. So you have to get all the materials, and then you research, you pull the cut sheets, you look at things like the options. So if say an architect said he wanted a 2-tier locker, well, did he want the Z shape? Did he want, does he want padlock hasps or combination lock? There's all these options that you really need to convey if you want to get the right thing. And then you have to confirm things like, is it going to meet a fire resistance rating? Is it going to meet, the performance I need for my roof to meet? I came from Oklahoma where we had hail, so roofs were, there was just, you didn't play around with the roofs there. So a lot of times that tech data, there might be something that's confusing or some piece of information that you're missing. That's when you call the rep to clarify that information. And have those conversations to make sure you're getting things right. And I wrote in here also learning about new and updated materials. I know it used to be pre-COVID that we would do this via lunch and learns, and now we have the internet, which is this unending source of new information, but it's hard to keep up with all the new things that are out there. And that is why, a lot of us rely on organizations like CSI that can give us little, tidbits and weekly briefings to kind of help keep us up to date with some of that information. But we also do definitely very much rely on product reps to help with that information. Code requirements are also always changing. It's hard to keep up with all the changes constantly going on. So you have to coordinate all these specs with your consultants and get them all to look similar, read a similar way. I know I had a couple projects where I had 2 consultants that wanted to give me the same number of section for their content. And I was going, nope, civil engineers doing that. You can't have the same number. And they refused to play nicely. So I just put in parentheses, like, this is the civil one and this is the mechanical one, because they just both wanted to use that number. I made a suggestion, but then I just rolled with, okay, this is what they gave me and this is how we're going to handle this. But there are a lot of consultants, and you can actually get, you can be combining a project manual from multiple sources. The bigger the project is, the more likely it is that it's going to have a bunch of specialty consultants, healthcare, food service. Now even just for hardware, you need a low voltage consultant, and dealing with security and all those things. There's a lot to incorporate, and basically you want to just try to avoid overlaps if you're the person putting it all together. But you got to clearly define that level of quality expected. I had a memo that I would send out to all my consultants that it said, I expect this format, I expect to receive PDFs, I expect them to be named this way, so that once I got their content, I wasn't doing a bunch of work to rename or figure out what they just gave me and where it needs to go. So there are a few overlaps, like on something like masonry. Sometimes you have the architect and structural engineer doing work. So have those discussions up front and find out who is going to cover which part of the scope or the spec, and make sure you coordinate all that. So CSI has for years talked about the 4 C's, and then a couple of members have kind of added this 5th C onto the end. Your specs want to be clear, concise, correct, and complete. And the 5th C is that coordinated. So obviously clear, you want to reduce the conflicts. You don't want to tell someone on the drawings that it's blue and in the specs that it's red. So make sure everything is reading the same and not duplicated in more than one place. Make sure it's concise. Eliminate excess language. There used to be a lot of spec sections that would say the contractor shall blah, 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 blah. And in the last several years, people have tried to kind of remove all that. The specs are speaking to the contractor. So it is implied throughout, and we have taken out a lot of that extraneous language. So instead of the contractor shall provide this and this, now we say provide this and this. Make sure they're correct, ask for what you want, and don't leave extra stuff in the specs that you don't need, because that will confuse your bidders. Make sure it's complete, fill in all the blanks. Again, no excess info. And my rule of thumb was always check it as if you were bidding it, as if you were putting your name behind that little package. This is how you would do it. So coordinate, collaborate with your product manufacturers and consultants, and make sure just everybody's on the same page. Communicate about where you're at. And CSI also says, say it once, say it in the right place. You don't want to change it twice. So I was told there would be documentation. We are going to pop over here into a spec for a moment. Let me open up. So this is a spec software, and I'm sorry, I tried to zoom in on this earlier and it's not really very zooming in, but what you're seeing essentially is Spec Builder Cloud. And over here we have the listing of all the different divisions. And I'm going to click into 04 Masonry. And I'm going to pull up real fast as well. I'm going to show you some drawings from a project that I worked on that was built, just finished this year back in Oklahoma. And I'm going to show you an example of kind of what information I got. So here's our little project cover sheet. This is a really cool STEM camp for Girl Scouts in Oklahoma City. And I would often tell people, I take that rendering and I turn it into the actual drawings and specs that the contractor builds from. And I used to always give my designers a hard time for not showing things like downspouts on these renderings. I'm like, it's the real stuff. Where's the condensing units? All the stuff you don't want to put in your pretty rendering. But so I'm going to flip over to a page that shows some of the building elevations. So already, I mean, you can tell there's a lot of content on these pages. And then over here on this next page, right here, we have a little materials listing. Let's see. Get in here. So we've got some accent stone. Oh, no, I knew I would do that. So get back over here. Here we go. I scanned too far. So materials legend. Accent stone, Grayson tumbled, field stone, and Minnick is the name of a manufacturer out in Oklahoma. And then Acme brick, featherlight, golden stone, a Barrage HR16 wall panel. We've got tube light, thermally broken, slate gray. Doesn't even say, but those are window frames. And then there's several other Acme brick colors listed. And this job had a very specific purpose in its brick to show the actual, let me see if it's on the next page, to show, we were trying to show a lot of the geography of the, oh, no, not on that page, the actual layers in the stratosphere of the brick. And I think it's further in this set, so I won't keep going, but very cool pattern. And actually the pattern did have to be kind of, you know, here we go. The pattern did have to be shown on the drawings because it would be a little bit difficult to convey this via words. So we showed this cool pattern, and then you can kind of, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at, I'm used to having a different version of this that I can scan in a little bit better. Okay, well, so you're given this list of materials. You've got these Acme bricks to put in. So you go over to your spec software and you go, okay, I've got, and the numbers are, there's a lot of numbers. And of course, at the beginning, they look very daunting. And the more and more you read them and deal with them, the more and more you will come to recognize what those mean. So in here, you can see that they offer unit masonry in full length short form outline. There's also a different spec text is set up a little bit more for infrastructure type projects. So that's what you're seeing there. And then manufacturer specifications. So I can actually go, 6 different manufacturers have proprietary versions of this section that you can look at and get information from as well. So when I'm editing this, I basically click on full length, and I'm hoping it's not going to be super, super slow tonight. I didn't think about some of the lagginess of it on occasion, but we will wait for this to do its little array thinking. It's pulling all this project data, all the spec content from the, there we go, from the program. So then I go over to my edit tab. And again, it does its little Rubik's Cube. I should have put in some like little filler music for while it's doing these things. Okay, so I'm going to go and begin editing this section. And what's nice about some of these newer softwares is they've tried to make it a little bit more user-friendly. So on the left side here with the gray background, you will see the actual specification text. This is a full-length spec. And then you're seeing kind of a bookmark version here that shows you some of the main articles. And then over here on the right is a Q&A checklist. So this Q&A checklist makes it really, really easy to go, okay, I know on that list they gave me brick, and I know I'm going to have mortar in between the brick. I know I'm going to have ties and anchors for that brick and flashing and some accessories. Okay, that's the mortar grout materials. I'm also going to have mortar grout mixes. So I know I've got this stuff on my project, and you can always go back later and add information. So don't feel like, oh, I don't know for sure. You can always go back and add info. So you click next, and it will basically walk you through all the different options. And look, just on the left side, it automatically took those selections and it's crossed off the things that I've said I'm not needing right now. So then I can go to, and it's already even crossed out the corresponding articles in part 2 that related to those things that I said I didn't need. So I can go into brick over here in 2, and I can say, yep, I know I want a clay face brick, and I want it to comply. Here's where some of those ASTMs start to come into play. Basically, face brick is designated by one ASTM, and another one designates hollow brick. And if you were to go into those ASTMs, you would see that they do testing, you know, related to things like the freeze thaw and, you know, just how it's going to perform over time, things like that. So, and you basically in the software can, you can add or delete these options. So I can say, yes, I want that one. No, I don't want this one. And then there are occasionally little notes above this, because when you first look at this too, you're like, oh, what's grade MW? What's SW? I don't know what any of this means. And up here in this little blue edit node, it's telling you just a little bit. It will tell you a little snippet of information sometimes to say, you know, the ASTM 16 is tied to the types that start with F, and these other ones are associated with that. And if that's still not enough information, there is an evaluation document that comes with this particular software that goes through a lot of history, a lot of code related things, and it tells you some really helpful information that can really help you make these decisions and understand what all these acronyms within the section mean. So SW is severe weathering, MW is moderate weathering, or you can pick one that's either one. Either one, you know, usually moderate weathering is going to be fine, but you can always give someone the option to give you the fine or the better version if you want. And I used to sometimes joke with people that I would kind of spec the Cadillac and back off to the Buick, but you don't want to necessarily always spec like the best of the best, because then that's going to drive up all your bids. So you want to spec like the good stuff that you're, but sometimes you may want to start, it's almost like negotiating. You want to start like at the high end of that good stuff, so that if you do have to drop down a little and value engineer it, you're still kind of in that realm of good stuff, but maybe like at the bottom level of it rather than where you started, but you're still in that range of acceptable. So, but basically you go through this, and a lot of times, you know, I'll be honest, when I first started writing specs, I didn't know a lot of this stuff. I didn't have access to a lot of this stuff to even know how to understand it. So I did a lot of Googling, and sometimes I would go and ask the other spec writer in my office, and he would say, did you Google it? So I definitely learned a lot of stuff via just jumping in and trying to figure it out. And usually once you get, if you look at the dimensions for your brick, it's going to tell you all this stuff. So the cut sheet is going to tell you a lot of this stuff that you need to select. So it's not like you just have to go, well, shoot, I don't know if it's 2 3/4 or 3 or 3 1/2. The cut sheet will tell you all of that. And then you basically just edit out what you need or don't need. So then something like accessories, for instance, within this brick section, there's compressible filler, gaskets, bond breakers, weep cavities and vents. But then within the weep cavities and vents, there's like 6 different types. So if you're new or don't know, then have a conversation with somebody about this and go, which is the thing that I need to do? Do I need to weep or vent or both? So have a conversation with a masonry person and find out some of that stuff as far as, what is best practice. A lot of what I know from just being inquisitive and asking questions of people who I know are dealing with this stuff on the day-to-day. So, okay, I'm in jeopardy of going on too long because I do get wrapped up in this. So I'll get back to my little presentation. And so how can we improve the specs? How can each role contribute to better specs? So as an owner, if an owner were to get more involved and ask those questions about things like warranties and maintenance and, provide info in a timely manner, that would greatly help specifications. AEs and consultants, it's all about taking the time, coordinating things, reducing repeats and conflicts. Contractors, ask questions early. That is one of, I know the design team's biggest pet peeves is being asked for substitutions during construction. It's even more annoying when there's been pre-construction and it's like, we've been talking for months and then you just told me now that especially when I gave you 6 products to choose from and then you're submitting a 7th one. And now I'm having to do research on the 7th one and make sure it still fits the design intent. Even though you signed a form probably saying my substitution meets your design intent, I still have to do the due diligence and check it. So it can create a lot of extra work for the design team when substitutions happen. And there are a lot of rules in Division 1 that talk about substitutions really shouldn't happen unless something becomes totally unavailable. So there's a lot of things that can happen there during the construction process and a lot of unknowns and it's almost like a game of telephone at times where there's like, okay, the subcontractor told the contractor, sometimes the subcontractor has a question, the contractor is going to word it in an RFI to the architect, and then so the contractor is almost playing a middleman sometimes between the design team and the subs that are doing the work and trying to really connect these dots. And so it can be a very difficult thing to navigate the construction if people aren't communicating well. So subcontractors ask questions if intent is unclear and provide that feedback to the design team to improve. And product reps can be such a helpful resource to all sides, really, in my opinion. And they can provide current technical info. Well-formatted specs are very nice to get from product reps. And you can offer that spec review or input or, let them know like, hey, if there's something in there that's confusing, just give them a, hey, it would be helpful for subs if that was not like that. So I would love to see product reps act more as connecting the dots to subcontractors and helping to educate all sides. Because occasionally I will hear from a GC, oh, well, the subcontractor didn't really realize that wasn't an apples to apples substitution. So they thought they were bidding in line with your design intent and the construction documents. And we're over here on the design team going, you were nowhere close. So, communicating between all those parties, hopefully we can get closer and closer to on the same page. So considerations for a career in specifications. Having more technical knowledge will help in just about any way, shape, and form in this industry. So that's just always a great thing to have. And there is a huge generational gap in specifications. A lot of them are retiring out. So there is a high demand right now for spec writers. And there's actually, there are a lot of English majors who write specs. Like people who have an English degree end up kind of falling into a spec thing sometimes, because it is a lot of kind of wordsmithing and editing and things like that. And there's, you know, there's people who started off doing specs as an administrative assistant and have worked their way up and are now like specification pros. So I tell people all the time, I'm like, don't miss out on this opportunity. It sounds very technical, and it sounds very, it sounds like something that might be very niche or very difficult to get into, but it's almost a matter of just having some guts to jump in and try it and see where it leads you. And that's a little bit of what I did. I was asked to start writing specs. I was told to join CSI and get this CDT. I had never heard of any of these initials, and I jumped right in. And I found people to ask the questions to, and it was all very wonderful. So you can bring so much value to your project team by knowing a lot of this stuff. It helps diversify your skill set. I know I personally felt like knowing specs and doing specs is what saved me from being laid off in 2008, when last time the economy tanked, because someone who had started a few months before me was let go, and we had about the same level of experience and everything. We actually graduated at the same time. So even though she had a couple months on me, I was able to stick around, and I'm pretty sure it was because I did specs. And so they were like, we're not letting the spec writer go. There is a learning curve to get the hang of it, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. I know it's a lot of numbers and alphabets up first, and I've been on a job site with a guy who could spout AS10s off the top of his head, and I was just like, I don't know that I'll ever be there, but good for you. You don't have to memorize it all, but you'll learn it as you do it. Communication is super important, and taking the time. Don't wait till the last minute, which I have been guilty of myself. I have been up many, many nights finishing a project spec, and that's when I realized, oh no, I need to call a rep and find out more information about this. I'm sure I've left many a frantic message for a product rep saying like, can you call me back? I need to confirm something, and this project is going out today. Thank you. So try to take it, try to not procrastinate on it, which I know is easier said than done, but especially just looking over and seeing what information you need and trying to ask some of those questions before you're working on things at the last minute. Choose your battles. I know as a specifier, I would occasionally go and kind of not necessarily like argue with the design team, but I would sort of question them on some of their choices, because, you know, I'm trying to keep in mind not just the aesthetics, like maybe some of them are kind of focused a little more on the aesthetic, but I'm trying to make sure, you know, performance and all these other little technical things are going to be in line with the owner's needs. So but just keep in mind, we're all on the same team, and hopefully everyone can work together and come to a consensus. As a specifier, you do have to set very clear expectations for people and deadlines for when you need to receive information. I joked with them one year that I was going to be a psychic for Halloween because I felt like they wanted me to be a mind reader, and I was like, I can't be a mind reader. I can't know all this stuff. So it got to a point where instead of asking and then never getting the answer, I started to say, I need to know what species of wood you're using on those doors by this date, or it will not be in the specification. So I had to get very clear and direct with the information I needed and when I needed it by, so that I could get my work done in a timely manner as well. So here are some next steps if you are considering a career in specifications. CSI CDT certification is top of the list, and you might notice that the word should is in italics there, because I have several CSI designations. I have CCS, Certified Construction Specifier, and I also have the CCCA, which is the Certified Construction Contract Administrator. And So the last one is all about administering the contract and during construction. And the first job I had after that, I was like, I'm going to do it by the book. It's going to be great. And the very first submittal they gave me was a substitution without a substitution request. And I was just like, okay. So the CDT will tell you how project delivery should work. It may not always be the real world situation, but essentially you will at least have the tools in your toolbox and know how things should work and be able to call someone on it if they are out of line. So building your network is huge. Curate a list of people to ask questions to. And product reps, I highly recommend you find an architect you like to ask them questions to, because it can really help connect some of those dots. And yay, Google research is wonderful. Make sure you check the sources though and verify things, because for instance, there are a lot of great articles out there, but then if you see like, oh, well, they're written by someone who works for this manufacturer, and then it's like, oh, so there might be a little bit of a bias to that. So just like hopefully some of us have learned this year, news and internet is not always completely correct. So make sure you're checking your sources and verifying things. And if something is just unclear, pick up the phone and have a conversation. Don't make assumptions. That's a pretty big one. It can bite you in the butt. Technical knowledge is huge. It can increase your value anywhere. And you know, one of the big things now in the spec world is combining the BIM and the specs. And there are a lot of people who, it's a very gray area. So if you know, you saw like in the past several years, I think I've really seen like the BIM manager kind of like take this different role. That role didn't used to exist several years ago, and now you know, firms have things like that. So you know, you could really take on something like that, like combining the BIM and specs and find a niche that a lot of people are going to need coming up soon. Ask questions. Curiosity is probably the #1 trait that a good specifier has. You want to know how it goes together, how it interfaces with everything next to it, all that stuff. There are no dumb questions. So if you ask a question to someone and they respond that way, they're not the person to ask questions to. Find someone else to ask questions to. But better information leads to better decisions. And I added this like kind of at the last minute, but there's more than one answer, and that can be very frustrating. But if you ask 4 specifiers, you will probably get 4 different answers. So keep that in mind too. Sometimes, you know, some of these answers you might get from people are opinions, or, you know, they might be a little biased if they are certain, you know, if they rep for a certain product. But I know I always have appreciated reps that have been very truthful about like, hey, maybe our product isn't the best application for this, or helped me provide me with specific info as to why they might be the better choice. So yeah, it's just having those conversations is really, really helpful and key to this. And CSI can give you all 5 of these things. It really is such a key to my professional development. It has given me many, many, many network, you know, people, mentors, information, certifications, and like I said, the place to ask questions to. I'm a member of AIA as well, and it is not as open of an environment, in my opinion. It is somewhat a room full of your competition, and CSI has never felt that way. CSI has always felt like it is very open, and we are all here to foster each other and build knowledge and improve project delivery together. We're all here to like put everybody on the same page. So that is why I love this group so much. And I made my own meme. So I'm pretty much done, and I am open to questions now. So what do you guys want to know about specs?
Melly, I just have to say that was an awesome presentation, super informative. I can't think of any questions. I mean, kind of answered everything, which is awesome. And I love, love, love the memes.
Thank you.
So fun.
I have a question.
Go for it.
I get the feeling from talking to mid-size architecture companies that if they have master spec, they don't need to have a spec writer. that they have all the tools that they need to do it. So I get that Master Spec is a great tool, but I feel like maybe it's a crutch for the architect to not be a spec writer. Is anybody else feeling that way as well?
Well, we definitely, so I had a conversation earlier this year when I was on a panel for Construct about the future of specifiers. And we talked a lot about sort of the difference between the small S specifier and the big S specifier. And we somewhat define the small S specifier as a project architect that is making selections and possibly doing some of their own specs. Whereas the large S specifier is more like the specifier, and that's all they do all day long is specifications. So firms are very, very different in how they handle that. And yes, I would say a lot of when you're a small firm, you don't have the luxury of probably having someone just committed to doing specs. So you're going to see that more of the PAs are handling their own portion of that. And in mid-sized firms, it can be that way as well. And then it's once you get to a big size firm that they can have that dedicated like spec person. So I don't think it's necessarily like an excuse for them. And some people have different schools of thought just as to how technical and involved that project architect should be in the spec. Some people absolutely believe that, every architect should do their specs, no question. And other architects are like, don't give me the specs, I don't want to touch them. So it's very dependent on the firm. And I would say I would love if every PA knew like all the stuff they need to know to do the specs and to do them well. Unfortunately, it's something like it's not taught in architecture school. I went back when I was taking my exams and I was like, did we get anything about specs? I found like one handout. I mean, they don't talk about it. It's just not, and even in different schools, I went to a school that was known for being a little more of an architecture, like an artsy side of architecture versus a technical school. So there's a lot of different trains of thoughts. And even within a firm, you can give them a standard. They're not going to follow it. Like, it's so frustrating because architects just kind of do everything their own way, no matter no matter if you've given them a guide or here's the path, they will still probably take a little diversion and do it their own way. So I'm glad to hear that they at least have Master Spec, and hopefully they have an updated version and it's not one that they bought in 2010 and never updated, because that also can be a little problem in our field. So it's tough, but the more each individual architect can know about specs, the better. But unfortunately, it is a lot of information for every person to like specialize in or know it all. So it's tough. And then if every architect in the firm is doing their own specs, how do you keep any sort of firm history? Like, how do you like make sure that you aren't specifying something that I just reviewed as a substitution and denied because it isn't good? So that's a real task as well for firms to try to keep everything somewhat cohesive and similar. And I don't know if that really answered your question, but it's different everywhere, and it's a very conditional thing.
I'm glad to hear your comments. I do have another question, though, if I may.
Sure.
I noticed that when I'm looking for specs on projects, I'm doing that via a Dodge report.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of specs on design, bid, build projects, but I don't see a lot of specs in Dodge reports from design, build. Are architects putting their specs together differently on design build projects than on design bid build projects, or making them available, I should say?
Well, I know I worked on a lot of negotiated bid projects where the owner might have a select list of GCs they were going to bid it to. And here I am going Impro corner guards. And then my Impro rep is like, no, I never heard of that job. And I'm like, you absolutely should have bid that job because you guys were in there like on the product schedule, you know, like I don't know what's going on. So yeah, it can be difficult. And those Dodge reports, occasionally I would get calls where I'm like, that job went on hold 5 years ago. You know, like I don't know how they keep those up to date. And so yeah, I mean, if it's public, it's probably going to be on there, and if it's straight design bid build, it's going to be on there. But I'm not even sure the best way to really hunt down some of the negotiated bid or design build things. I don't know if any of our contractor members have any input on that. I'm looking at Jake and Allie.
Well, I will say for Emmerich, you know, the specifications are super important on projects because that's what we use when we send out our bid invitations. And it's completely based on, we go into our smart bid software, we put in all the spec sections that's on the project. And then with that, it sends out invitations to any sub that's listed under those specifications. It doesn't necessarily go out to specific products because we don't always have time, especially on the hard bid jobs, to drill in and figure out who each of the manufacturers is on everything and make sure they're bidding it. We try to when we can, but for the most part, it's based on, you know, we've got subcontractors listed under the spec sections. We send them an invitation as soon as their spec section pops up on a project.
I'd just say with regards to design build or negotiated design build projects, I think it boils down to two things, and I don't know which one is of a higher priority, so I'll just say it in this order, and it doesn't have a priority. But the relationships that the contractor and the architect have facilitated with the product representatives, and then the actual performance, the historical performance on previous projects of those products. Because when it's negotiated, there's a lot of conversations that are going on that's, well, what have you used before in this situation? Or what issues have you had with this type of design in the past? If it's a collaborative negotiated approach, a IPD light, if you will. So it boils down to history of performance and relationships, which is not how a hard bid works. A hard bid is a lot more mechanical, a lot more, you got to put it out there, and there've got to be all these databases to share information evenly, and it has to be somewhat, I'd say a level playing field, but I know it isn't. So, you know, that's an interesting question.
Thanks for your answers.
It is difficult. Courtney, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's really, I don't know, I'm on the public side nowadays, but it's the relationships, knowing that you're having contact with, you know, the architect offices, and just continue. I know there are a lot of hesitation with architects to reach out to every rep who always contacts. I mean, you know, we get inundated, and I love it, but I hate it. It's a constant battle of back and forth. But if you know that the project is coming, and we've reached out to you, it's definitely easier to know. So the more you kind of hound us, it works. So.
You know, before COVID, the free lunch was a great way to get into the office, and everybody loved that free lunch, and they would show up to the lunch and learn. And so I really feel for the product reps right now. I know it's difficult to make a connection via like a Zoom meeting, but it is still possible, and you can still set up one-on-one Zoom calls that are actually, you know, a nice break from my room by myself talking to my dog. So yeah, any more questions?
You know, Melody, just maybe a couple of points here. First off, in regards to online-based CEUs, I will tell you that the firms I've been working with here in recent weeks, actually today I had a CEU for a 3-office firm in 2 states. the firms seem to be, and maybe it's because the end of the year and we're up on our credit requirements, but the firms seem to be, in my experience, exceedingly accommodating in getting us in for an online webinar. I will say, you know, my approach is to follow up with some technical resources and documentation. The other thing I would add is Don, my friend Don, brought up a point about master spec. You know, as you were talking in your presentation, Melody, I downloaded our manufacturer-driven proprietary spec for adhered veneer masonry, 24 pages. Do we really think that a project spec for adhered veneer, a thin brick job, is going to require a 24-page? My point is, given the nuances of, let's just use adhered veneer masonry as the example, a spec writer or a project architect are not going to, I wouldn't expect them to understand all the nuances of the respective performances of each product that's in that quote unquote master specification from the manufacturer. I would encourage, I know my friend Don is a product rep, Maddie, Miranda, you know, the product manufacturer team that we have assembled here, we're all exceedingly available to help you separate the wheat from the chaff. And it's really required because depending on the finish, the environmental condition, the service requirement, let's just talk about tile or masonry for a minute, that creates a really profound moving target that we really need to weed through and provide specifics in regards to the performance values of the materials. So that's just kind of the axe I wanted to grind. If there's some means in which we can, as product reps, make ourselves the best available in providing the information in a very streamlined basis, well, then I am all ears to hear from the design professionals assembled here. But I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
One of the things that was interesting when I started writing specs, like, I don't know, 12 years ago or something, was that once I realized that like Masterworks or BSD, like you're starting in, let's say, a gypsum board section and it has like 36 pages. And once you realize that at the end, you're probably only going to have like 4 or 5. And most of the stuff that's in there doesn't even pertain to your project anyways. Then it got a lot less scary because very quickly you can like cut out all the stuff that you don't need, and suddenly you are from like 26 down to 9. And then that's when you start to do your research, and then you bring it down to 6, and then you're pretty close. So it doesn't really matter which software you use.
Yeah, I would say that, oh, sorry, it can be very daunting. And some of the sections are very, very long. Unit masonry is like 66 pages long. But that's because it has to include every option that an architect might need for any job. So it is, when you open up some of these sections to edit them, it is like, this is a lot of content. And if you just print it out to read it, you're like, oh my gosh. Whew. So it looks like a lot, but yes, it's because, and trust me, like going from writing a project spec to now I'm on the back end and trying to think of every little thing that we might need in this section to suit any situation. It's a whole different ball game to try and think of all those things, you know, because I'm sitting here going, well, I would normally do it this way. And I'm like, but I always work on, you know, usually like kind of low story commercial, like two unit things. And it's just there's so many options. I recently had a guy asking, you know, why doesn't Master Spec have a window washing equipment, building facade maintenance section? And I was like, well, we don't have every section that Master Format has, and we're always trying to expand our library, but some of it is definitely driven by usage and how many people need that. And specifically window washing equipment is something that an owner might contract with a company to do. So a lot of times it might be outside of the construction contract for the building, but like obviously you need the tie-offs, you need to make sure the structure is going to hold that stuff up. So it's a conversation. That's one of those things that you need to have a conversation with your owner about, to say like, hey, by the way, how are you going to wash these windows on the 20th floor? We might need to add some extra structure so there's something to tie to, so that can happen later. But yeah, there's a lot of nuanced stuff. And as a specifier in a firm, there would be times that I was overwhelmed and people would be like, well, what can we do to help? And I'm like, all the information is in my brain as far as, you know, where I'm at on the spec, because you don't usually work on a spec like linearly. I don't go, well, I'm done with that section, next section. It doesn't really work that way. You hop around. And I recently, so there's a CSI member named Susan Bliss who has started a really awesome thing called Spec Lab. And she is basically, her big aim is to help train like the next generation of specifiers. And she's a CSI member. She's very, very knowledgeable. And she actually had a webinar yesterday that I watched and hopped onto, because I was like, well, I don't want to tell people how cool it is unless I know for sure it's cool. But she's just trying to break down a lot of this information and help make it more palatable so that it is not so overwhelming, because a lot of people do, you see a spec book and it's this big, it looks like a textbook. It's just, where do you even start with that? So it's a lot to just bite into, but you have to start somewhere. So jump in and just start swimming and ask questions.
So I actually had a quick question. How did you get into working with Deltec, going from an architectural firm and then writing specs on the back end?
So I essentially got here through my CSI connections. I have a coworker who I've known through CSI. She's still in Oklahoma City. And she actually said, oh, are you looking for a new opportunity? This is what we're doing. And I actually met my now manager through CSI years ago. And it was funny because we've been on LinkedIn connected for years. And then when he called me to interview me, he was like, am I supposed to know you? And I was like, no, like, I know who you are. And you came and he actually did like a CDT training class one day at a region conference I was at. So, but it was very nice icebreaker as far as like, we already somewhat knew each other by name at least, or I knew who he was through CSI. But so having the CCS designation is probably the main reason that they even considered me for the job. So having that certification was definitely a big deal, as far as they want to make sure that the people writing for Master Spec really get the format, really understand specs, and, you know, so yeah, but definitely CSI connection was a huge, huge help in getting my foot in the door.
It's interesting, you know, like I write specs, so it's interesting knowing as a spec writer, that's all I do, that there's other outlets too to maybe work towards than writing specs with a firm.
So I was planning to move to Oregon, and initially I was going to go out on my own and maybe just be a spec consultant and write, you know, by contract. And then I thought, I'm moving to a whole new region of the world where I don't really know as many connections. I had a ton of connections in OKC, but I'm still getting to know people up here. So yeah, and then I thought, and it's a whole different region. I come from Oklahoma where, yeah, brick is everywhere because you pull it right out of the ground there, and it's not the same here, you know, up here in Northwest, it's a lot of wood. So I thought, gosh, maybe that's not the best idea. So that's when I started, you know, and I honestly don't know that I even would have, initially when I started writing specs, I was very concerned with being put in the specifier box and being put in that corner basement office where you know, I never see the light of day. So I was very concerned with staying somewhat diversified in my skill set. So while I was specifying at my last job, I was also doing PA production. I was in Revit. I was at meetings. I kind of did it all. And we used to have another guy that did that too. And then when he went away, they were like, Melody, train all the PAs how to do their own specs. And I went, ooh, I can try, but like not everyone is suited for specs because it is a very detailed, you're listing out nails and screws, you know, you're listing out a lot of minutia type stuff. And there are certain architects who are just big vision people. We need them too. Like we need the details and the big vision, and we need them to go together, because I know I get hung up on the details to where I'm like, I don't know, how are you going to clean that? Like that's me all over. I'm like, how are you going to clean that? So, you know, you need both of those elements. But yeah, it's interesting. And I started off not wanting to just be a specifier, but I was even kind of thinking of maybe even leaving the architecture field in general, because I was tired of a lot of the things like the moving deadlines and as a specifier, sometimes you are a little bit of an afterthought. People forget about it sometimes and don't place the importance on it like it really needs to be. So I had a lot of frustration.
That says you need the project yesterday.
Yeah, or you stay up all night and then in the morning they're like, oh, we pushed that to next week. And you're like, oh, nobody told the specifier. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, there was some trials and some difficulties, but you know, overall, I definitely feel like I just liked this part of it a lot. I just really feel like it was something that kind of latched onto me. And then when I was considering maybe even leaving the field, I thought, well, maybe I'll do something like editing or like research. And then I'm like, oh, wow, this is perfect. So I landed in a job that is specs. So I get to do a lot of research and editing. And so it's really nice. And I enjoy doing it. More questions? Does anybody want to be a specifier now?
I got a question, Melody.
Yes.
How'd you make that sweater?
Okay, so a friend sent me a link to a very colorful Christmas video. I think it's called like Belle's Gifts Bows, and I can't remember and how to make it. But so that was my inspiration for these glove shoulder pads. And they are affixed via paper clips to my shirt. So I just kind of got some garland, and
it looks so glamorous.
Thank you. Thank you. I got the ugliest / prettiest rainbow garland they had, and went for it. So yeah, are we doing an ugly sweater reveal, Miranda?
We are, yes. Thank you, Melody, for your presentation. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. One last time, if you would like your continuing education units, put it in the chat. I saw Dawn ask for a certificate. Anyone else who needs one, let us know now. Thank you again to all of our sponsors and to Pat and Constructing Hope. And we're so happy to be able to contribute. And finally, the winner of the $50 Powell gift card is Mariana. We love your sweater.
I'm honestly shocked. Thank you.
And your earrings and all of it. And the background. And
you gotta show it off again.
Yep, let's see it. So I think I have your email. As long as that one works best, then I'll send your e-gift card there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you everyone for being here, and looks like John's email there. So yeah, I think that concludes our event. We're working on our January event and intergenerational panel, so look out for information there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Feel free to
have a good night. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all. Happy holidays. Have a good night.
Oh, I love your hat.
We're all disappearing.
Okay.
Night.
Night.
Bye.
Hey, Miranda. I saved the chat.